What's up, everybody? Welcome to the video. Chris Pennell here. We're going over our quarterback tier rankings for the 2025 fantasy football season. Let's just move right into it. We have the S tier. We have two quarterbacks that are going to make it. I do have three in the A tier. I think they're on the cusp, right on the edge of being in that S tier, but I do have these two a tick ahead of the rest. And they're your two MVP candidates from last season. Lamar Jackson was your AP All-Pro. Josh Allen ended up winning the MVP award. I thought it should have went to Lamar, but I'm not going to make too much of an argument for it either way. But Lamar is going to be my QB1, and I think it's very close between the two. But what we saw from Lamar Jackson was nothing short of incredible last season. And that's not to put down Josh Allen by any means. These are definitely the clear-cut two top quarterbacks. But Lamar Jackson was quite more consistent last season. He had those big ceiling games and really never lost you any weeks. So they were both first and second in fantasy points per game last year, 23.4 for Josh Allen, 25.8 for Lamar Jackson. But Lamar, if we're looking at their consistency rankings and their performance rankings, which is something that I developed, Lamar had 0 bad games last year. And now that's a point threshold of anything less than 12 fantasy points, then anything elite is 25 plus fantasy points, then average falls in with where you kind of expect, and then good as well. But Lamar, 0 bad fantasy games. That is something you absolutely need when you're paying a premium for the quarterback position, because I'm someone that typically likes to wait and I'll either stream quarterbacks in the right matchups, or I'll try to get a low-end QB that I think at least has a little bit of upside, which we will see later on in this B/C tier. But if you're paying a premium, you cannot have a quarterback that loses you any weeks. And Josh Allen, he can win you many, many weeks, but he had 3 bad games last year. That's 19% of the time. 19% of the time, paying a premium for Josh Allen probably lost you the week. Now, he still had 31% of league games, which is fantastic. 5 elite games, that's one of the highest. But Lamar came in with 0 bad games and 10 elite games. That's double the amount of Josh Allen. 59% of the time, Lamar Jackson was most likely winning you weeks. 12% average, 29% good. Josh Allen was typically good or elite, but still some of those bad clunker games, which is kind of to be expected when you have a team that can blow out other teams. But the same can be said for Lamar Jackson. The Baltimore Ravens are going to be able to blow out some teams as well. So it's kind of interesting to see how that ended up playing out. But these guys are obviously first or second. In most statistical categories, rushing quarterbacks are the name of the game in this era of fantasy football, because it really just boosts your floor and your ceiling is high as well. So it's a win-win situation. There's no win-lose. It's amazing, and that's why they're going so high. Now, Lamar Jackson does not get the rushing touchdowns. You have the behemoth of Derrick Henry behind you, so they're just going to hand it off. Josh Allen will get those rushing touchdowns because they can just do a form of their tush push like Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles does. If you're looking at their rushing touchdowns per game difference, it's 0.8 for Josh Allen, only behind Jalen Hurts. And then Lamar is only at 0.2. He had 4 rushing touchdowns last year, but did have him beat in the rushing yards department. And both these teams, these team points per game is the projection based off of the sportsbook odds from this season. And if you guys don't use Vegas at all in your projections or your rankings or your start sit decisions, you should probably start doing that, because they're very good at their jobs. There's a reason they had the fancy hotels and they make a lot of money. I don't care how smart you think they are or you are. You should definitely be basing that into your own thought process. And these two have the 2 highest projected points per game totals of the season. And if they're going to be scoring points, tends to be based off the quarterbacks. I want the quarterbacks for those teams. So these are easily the 1-2 this season. Moving on to the A tier, we have 3 here. And like I said, you can make a case for, I would say, all 3 of them to be in the S tier, but they kind of defeats the purpose of having an upper echelon S tier to separate them. I would say at the very least, the first 2, Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow, definitely make the case. I don't think myself I would put Jaden Daniels in there already. But Jalen Hurts, one of the safest bets every single week. Is he the flashiest player? No. But what we like him for is that rushing touchdown per game at nearly 1. Any single time they're inside the 3, 2, 1 yard line, you know you're getting 6.1, 6.2, or 6.3 fantasy points, because that tush push is happening and that tush push is working. They voted on to potentially ban it this year. That's not going to be the case. So fantasy points galore still for Jalen Hurts. He's in a great offense. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley. The fantasy points are just going to keep on rolling. The Eagles are going to keep putting up big scores. Joe Burrow. So unlike any other quarterback we have talked about so far, he is not a rushing quarterback. Now, there you can get the occasional rushing touchdown, 0.1 per game last year. Like, it's very, very, very occasional. 11 rushing yards as well. He's not a complete statue, but prefer to keep him in the pocket. But Joe Burrow, the Cincinnati Bengals are the perfect fantasy football team. Terrible defense. Maybe they got a little bit better this year, but it's still not going to be very good. It's very hard to flip it that quick. And that's what we like. We want games to be shootouts. And I'll be honest, a lot of NFL games are pretty boring these days. But when the Cincinnati Bengals play Baltimore Ravens play, the Buffalo Bills play, those games tend to be fun. Same with the Washington Commanders and the Bengals. When you have a bad defense and an elite offense, that screams fantasy points because they're going to have to stay in games. They can't just run and chew the clock out at the end. Unlike the three teams that we talked about, the Bengals are going to have to keep fighting, and Burrow was amazing last year, even though he does not have the rushing upside. Still one of the lower standard deviations, which if you don't know anything about standard deviation, if you score 100 points 5 times in 5 games, that's 0. If you were at like 50, 150, 200, that means you're out of whack and you're not that consistent, so it's kind of a bit iffy what you're going to get. But you get the passing yards every single time, 290 passing yards per game, which was first, 2.5 passing touchdowns, and all the money on this team is between 3 players. It's Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase, and they're going to use them, and Joe Burrow's going to use them, and it should be just another amazing season. Only issue is last year you got them cheap. This year, not so much. The first overall pick's going to be Cincinnati Bengal. You got to pay up for Joe Burrow. T. Higgins isn't all that cheap either. Chase Brown's kind of expensive, so the fun times are over as far as value is concerned, but we still got to like them. And then as for Jaden Daniels, amazing rookie year. He really reminds me of Lamar Jackson. I know that's not a hot take. I'm sure most people do think that, but the similarities are certainly there. Now, unfortunately, there's always the potential for the sophomore slump. He's coming off a great year. He's going to be hyped up this season. Could be a bit overvalued because of that. But we can't ignore what he did last year. He's got the rushing upside, 1.5 passing touchdowns per game, which put him in the top half of the league. But right there with Lamar Jackson and rushing yards, like only a yard off as far as rushing yards per game, and a decent amount of rushing touchdowns. 0.4 in the season, which did put him at top 5 for the quarterback position. The Commanders are going to put up points, and similar to the Cincinnati Bengals, not the best defense in the world, which is what we love. Now, 20.5 fantasy points per game definitely puts him a tick below these other guys, but if he can improve and build upon what we saw last year, he's got enough weapons to make it work. And like I said, we are suckers for rushing upside in fantasy football. Okay, moving on to our B tier. I'm going to be honest. I wanted to put Baker Mayfield in the A tier. I am very, very high on this Tampa Bay offense this season. It kind of reminds me of more of like a light or a Walmart version of the Cincinnati Bengals. They don't quite have the name power of Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, but Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, whenever he gets healthy, Jalen McMillan, the rookie from last year, coming into his sophomore season, we saw some flashes. You have the rookie from Ohio State, Ibuka, this season. You have Cade Otton, Bucky Irving. I love this Tampa offense. Baker Mayfield had plenty of time to throw last year. I know Tristan Wirfs is done with an injury early on. Maybe that hurts them a little bit. But the Tampa Bay defense isn't anything that great, and he gets to play the NFC South many times this season. You get the Carolina Panthers twice. You get the Atlanta Falcons twice. New Orleans Saints twice. Those are easy matchups. I feel like we're going to have some pretty high-scoring games from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're actually one of the highest as far as projected points per game so far this year. So sign me up for all the Baker Mayfield. He had a great season last year. Of course, there could be some regression. I totally understand that. 20.5 fantasy points per game. Ran the ball a little bit, nearly 400 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. The big thing, though, 41 passing touchdowns. That was only 2 behind Joe Burrow and tied with Lamar Jackson. 4,500 passing yards. Moving on to our C tier, these are low-end QB1, high-end QB2 options. If you're holding 2 quarterbacks, that's probably because you have a guy like Kyler Murray and a Dak Prescott. You're playing the matchup game week to week, or you need your bye-week filler. So these are the kind of options you are dealt with. We're going to lead off the C tier with Dak Prescott, and I actually think he's a pretty good option. If you're someone that's waiting on quarterback this year, I think Dak Prescott's one of the better choices because he's shown in the past he has fantasy upside. This is a team that I assume is going to be throwing the ball quite a bit this season because if you look at the running back room, you have Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders. I don't know about you guys, but they're both ass. So I don't really think they're going to be able to win games with those two, and they're going to have to throw the football. And why not when you have CeeDee Lamb, one of the best wide receivers in the game? They brought in George Pickens, who I know can be a bit of a dumbass. He's a headache, but he does have all the talent in the world. So assuming the Cowboys are going to be throwing the ball quite a bit, we saw their defense not be that great this last year. They're probably going to be somewhat improved, but either way, I think this is a pretty good situation for Dak Prescott at the price you have to pay for him. Brock Purdy, top 10 quarterback, back-to-back seasons. They did lose fat-ass Deebo Samuel, which is probably going to be a plus for that team. Hated him because I did have him last year, and he did have those good games, but, man, I think he fell off, and maybe not the best shape. I don't know. I mean, he's thick, he's solid, but he does annoy me as a player. But Brandon Ayuk, coming off the injury from last season, John Jennings is currently unhappy with his contract situation. Ricky Purcell didn't show some flashes last year. We should have CMC nice and healthy this season, but does have arguably the best tight end in football in George Kittle. I know Brock Bowers is incredible, so is Trey McBride, but George Kittle is no slouch. He is right up there with them, in my opinion. But what I like about Brock Purdy is the system. The system is usually more important than most things. And when you're in the Kyle Shanahan system, this produces fantasy points, and I'm just going to keep buying in on that. Not a big rushing guy, but he can scramble a little bit. I mean, if you're looking at his rushing numbers from last season, 323 rushing yards, 5 rushing touchdowns. It could 100% be worse. In 4 league games last year, 3 bad, 4 average, 4 good, pretty even spread across there. And the next guy is not someone that's easy to trust by any means, and it does not feel good if he comes in as your QB1 for the season. But I think Caleb Williams does have some upside. We brought in the new coach, Ben Johnson. That's going to be the big thing this year. Finally got rid of last year's guy who's awful. I mean, just some of the coaching decisions and time management, especially on Thanksgiving. I think we all remember the Thanksgiving massacre. It was horrible to watch. And if you're looking at the player card here, hopefully it's not too small to read. Caleb Williams last year was tied for the most bad games of any quarterback we're going to talk about. Tied with Kirk Cousins with 9 bad games. That's 53% of the time. He is probably losing you the week. Was still able to have 4 elite games, which is nice, 24% of the time. And we know he's got the arm talent. I mean, number 1 pick for a reason. He was great at USC. And he is surrounded by good weapons. So hopefully Ben Johnson's going to be able to use that correctly. And he does have some scramble upside. He did not have any rushing touchdowns last year, but nearly 500 rushing yards. Always nice to get an extra 2 to 3 fantasy points on the ground, 20, 30 rushing yards per week. DJ Moore, Ramadunze, they have Luther Burden now, Loveland, who's obviously fine, and then Cole Kmet as well. So I think we're probably on the up and up here. And if you're in a pinch and you really waited on quarterback and there happened to be a QB run, you know, left with Caleb Williams at the end, I don't hate it. I think you could definitely do worse. And Justin Herbert never excites me. He is a much better real-life quarterback than he is a fantasy quarterback. 16.6 points per game last year, which is, I mean, nothing special. 16th in passing yards per game last year, 16th in passing touchdowns per game, 15th in rushing yards per game, 16th in rushing touchdowns per game from quarterbacks, 4 bad games, 4 league games, 6 average, 3 good. I mean, most of the time he is either okay to bad for fantasy purposes, so I'm not going to be overly excited about it. I mean, the Chargers have a decent offense, decent system going, but Justin Herbert never really excites me. And if this was a real life ranking, he'd be much higher, but for fantasy purposes, he just doesn't really get the job done too often. And I almost forgot Jared Goff. I do have him right over Brock Purdy. The only issue with Jared Goff is we have absolutely 0 rushing upside out of him. Just complete statue back there, which really hurts his floor. I mean, he has one of the higher standard deviations between all quarterbacks. And if we're looking at his overall numbers at the end of the year, they're good. The 19 fantasy points per game, over 4,600 passing yards, close to 40 passing touchdowns. He was 2nd in passing yards per game last year, 4th in passing touchdowns, but obviously just nothing on the ground. And he had 6 bad games last year. That is the most besides Caleb Williams that we have talked about so far, which is not something I want to pay for. 35% bad games last year, 29% elite. We know with the Detroit Lions, they're going to be one of the highest scoring teams this year, but we're going to have less dome games, which if you look at the dome splits for Jared Goff, especially when he's at home, it's a pretty major difference. And there's just the opportunity that the running backs score the touchdowns in certain games. And if that's going to be the case, I mean, Jared Goff is going to have nothing to show for him. I mean, he could have a game where he has 210 yards, 1 touchdown, or 0 touchdowns. And it's not going to get the job done. I mean, he can win you a week 29% of the time. He was elite, but those bad games are going to be there, and he is very up or down. So the end result you're typically happy with, but the consistency is definitely lower than other quarterbacks just because he is getting you absolutely nothing. Moving on to our D tier, at this point, we're just really at desperation mode. Your quarterback got hurt, you have a bye week, and everybody else already picked up the quarterbacks for the weekend. You scrambled, it's late, it's Saturday, you're like, oh shit, I need to get a quarterback. And I don't love any of these options this year. I mean, Jordan Love has a good arm, the Packers offense, but they'll just want to pound the rock with Josh Jacobs as much as they want. That's the only issue. The year before, I mean, Jordan Love was great in the touchdown department. If you're looking at last season, I mean, 15 fantasy points per game. Does not run the ball, 1 rushing touchdown, 83 rushing yards, 25 passing touchdowns, 3,300 passing yards. Talking 18th, 7th in passing touchdown, which, like I said, he does get the passing touchdowns sometimes, but lack of a run game, 2 elite games last year, 5 bad ones. That's 33% of the time. There's nothing really too appealing here. Now, JJ McCarthy, he is going to be an unknown. He was drafted highly the year prior, ends up getting an injury in the preseason, and unfortunately, we don't get to see him. Now, fortunately for the Minnesota Vikings, Sam Darnold came in and was an absolute baller for him. So if we're looking at how Darnold performed in this system, 18.5 fantasy points per game, which is fine. I mean, he doesn't really run the ball much, but over 4,000 passing yards, 35 passing touchdowns. So that's 6th in passing yards, 5th in passing touchdowns per game. Had 3 elite games, 8 good, which is a pretty good rate, 4 bad games. No rushing ability, like I said. But JJ McCarthy comes into one of the best situations you can ask for. I mean, you have Justin Jefferson to get the ball to, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. They should be looking to throw the ball quite a bit. So I think McCarthy definitely has upside. McCarthy's the guy that I think could definitely slide to the C tier, if not ascend higher, depending on how he performs. Obviously, technically it's going to be his rookie year. So that can always be a bit of a question mark, but I do think the upside's there. Drake May, coming into his sophomore season, showed some promise at the end of the year, but we have some added weapons into this Patriots offense. It still feels not amazing to have Patriots players. I mean, it's just kind of last year's offense. It was gross. He definitely opted a bit, and I think we're going to get better. I mean, we have Stephon Diggs now. They drafted Kyle Williams. They have Travion Henderson. So we're trending in the right direction for Drake May. And one thing we do like is that he has a little bit of rushing upside. 32 rushing yards per game last year. We'll have to see if that sticks, but if he can get us 25, 30 rushing yards, it just boosts the floor a little bit. And we know he's got the arm talent, so I don't mind Drake May. CJ Stroud, just a guy that doesn't really run the ball too much. Has some fine weapons, did lose Stephon Diggs. Nico Collins, one of the better wide receivers in the game. But other than that, I mean, you got Joe Mixon, but that doesn't really help out CJ Stroud too much. Tank Dell got injured late last season. So not a ton. I mean, Jaden Higgins is there. He might have some upside. Could be a sleeper this season, but I'm not overly excited about Stroud. Then we have Tua, which we know Tua has some big game upside. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. Fortunately, got rid of Jonnu Smith, who was pretty good last year. But the issue with Tua is he just tends to miss time every year with concussion. That concussion history, it just keeps getting worse. And it feels like every season we get the gang signs getting pulled up just because he gets absolutely demolished on a primetime game. Hopefully that doesn't happen. I don't want it to happen, but it's unfortunately something that we have to just account for. That's why he's so low on these rankings. Plus, he doesn't run the football. I mean, 49 rushing yards last year. That's Jared Goff status. 260 passing yards per game. That was fourth best and seventh in passing touchdowns per game at 1.7. But 3 bad games, only 1 elite game. Of course, we have to keep in mind lower. He did miss time, so 27% of the time he was bad, 9% of the time elite, 36% good, 27% average. He'll use Devon Chan in the checkdown game, but other than that, I mean, you cannot trust him as your QB1, especially for accounting for potential games missed. Then Trevor Lawrence, he's got good weapons around him. They just drafted Travis Hunter. He's going to be a prolific talent, I should say. We'll see how much he's involved on both sides of the ball. But Brian Thomas, he broke out last year in his rookie season, and I'm assuming he's only going to get better. It's the Jaguars. Their defense isn't very good, so that'll keep them playing the entire game. But Trevor Lawrence isn't that great of a quarterback. So when you look at his numbers last year, 14 points per game. Didn't really run the ball too much. 3 rushing touchdowns, 119 yards, 2,000 passing yards, 26 in points per game through the air, 28th in passing touchdowns per game. 1 elite game last season, but 30% of the time bad, 50% average. That's 70% of the time average too bad. And that doesn't leave much percentage-wise rest for good or elite. So Trevor Lawrence, you can't really trust these guys, and these are just dire situations. We have the F tier. I mean, hopefully you're not playing any of these guys, so I'm just going to go through it quickly. Gino, he's on the Las Vegas Raiders this season, threw the ball a ton last year, second most, only behind Joe Burrow, but new system this year. But they have Chip Kelly, obviously Brock Bowers, arguably the best tight end in football. Wide receiver situation isn't amazing. They brought in Genty, but Trey Tucker and Jacoby Myers, I don't know. I mean, Gino's good enough to where he can be productive here and there, but Geno Smith. Bryce Young ascended after the benching last year. They did bring in Tet from the draft, really high pick, and dude's a monster. Should be good. It's only going to help out Bryce Young. I think there's certain weeks and right matchups where we can maybe stream Bryce Young if you absolutely have to. And I think for DFS purposes, for those of you that I do have a DFS channel, I'll probably have some Bryce Young this year. Like if they're playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and he's cheap, I mean, in the right spot, we could play Bryce Young. Stafford does not run the ball at all. He is like Jared Goff. He is like Tua. The dude's a statue. He will not move. 41 rushing yards. I think that's the absolute lowest we have of any quarterback. 32nd in rushing yards per game at 2.6 last year. And of course, he's not going to get you a rushing touchdown. They do have Devontae Adams now, which is nice. Got rid of Cooper Kupp, but Puka Nacua, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't recommend it still. Michael Penix coming into his sophomore year didn't really show us anything that's going to wow us heading into this season. I mean, there's pieces on this offense that I like. I love Drake London, of course. Donald Mooney's finding the right spot. And then Bijan Robinson's my favorite running back this season, but doesn't really scream fantasy stardom. Anthony Richardson is probably the worst quarterback in the NFL. He is horrible. Awful. I mean, I create a bunch of spray charts, scatter plots, and Anthony Richardson always seems to be at the absolute very bottom. I mean, he is horribly inaccurate. It's bad. He checked himself out of the game last year because he was tired. I've never heard of that before for a quarterback. But I will tell you right now, as bad as he is, I don't think he's going to start the entire season. But the games that he does start, you could honestly put him in that C tier or above because of that rushing upside. Okay, he's got a cannon too. He can always connect with a bomb. But when he's playing, I mean, if we get 10 rushes for 80 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, I mean, that puts him in the firm QB1 status. So just know, in games that he does play, you could start him, assuming you don't have guys like Baker, Daniels, Burrow, Hurts out on the mar. But trusting him throughout the entire season is a big no-no for me. Sam Darnold, great last year, going to Seattle. Obviously a big downgrade there. They do have Cooper Kupp and JSN. They lost DK Metcalf. I think it'd be a lot more fun to throw the ball to Hawkinson, Addison, and Justin Jefferson. So big downgrade there. And he doesn't run the ball. And then Aaron Rodgers, he's like 40 years old. And yeah, DK Metcalf. Outside of that, Freiermuth and Calvin Austin. Good luck. With that being said, that's all for today's video. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, even if you didn't, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel for brand new. If any questions, comments, concerns, or you want to argue about rankings, be my guest. Do that down below. But wish you all the best, and I'll see y'all next time for the running backs.